boy, the market is heating up. And honestly, I'm like 50-50 on this. 50% surprised because I'm like, wait a minute, really? That's actually possible? And then 50% not surprised because I'm like, all right, well, of course this was going to happen. What, did you think anything else was actually possible here? Today we're talking about Evander Kane, Vancouver Canucks winger, and a guy who has been labeled as a primary trade chip for this hockey team. He's 34 years old, signed on till the end of this season, making $5.125 million a year, and there are a number of elements that pop up amongst Vancouver Canucks fans' collective brains when you mention Evander Kane's name. You can talk about the way in which he was acquired by Vancouver, whether or not it was actually a profitable decision for the Canucks to get this guy in the first place. Was it a meaningful trade to go out there and help out the Edmonton Oilers by freeing them up of this $5 million deal for one more season? Was it actually worth it for Vancouver to get a player whose reputation on and off the ice has been pretty down in the gutter the past few years? Now, I'll give Kane the benefit of the doubt. There were a lot of issues with him personally. In Winnipeg, Buffalo, and San Jose, he was always a pretty productive goal scorer and physical altercator on the ice, but there were a lot of issues. Now, big credits to Kane. He did clear a lot of that up in Edmonton, and he was able to portray himself as a very meaningful and appreciated part of the Oilers community. But that didn't stop a lot of Canucks fans from remembering what was the worst of Evander Kane's past before his days in EDM. You can also talk about the lack of overall positive play that Evander brings to the Vancouver Canucks lineup, which I don't want to say has actually been that bad. He's got 25 points in 56 games, on pace for 36 points over 81, which is admittedly right in line, I would say, with what many Canucks fans thought was a upper ceiling for what Kane could accomplish. I know I, like some other Canucks fans, were actually way more optimistic, saying, yeah, this guy could get 20 goals with Elias Pettersson. He could be a physical altercating force that stands up for Petey and makes things difficult for the opposition. He doesn't do either of those things, but he is still on pace for a reasonable 36 points. And the fact that he hasn't gotten into any off-ice drama, okay, that's kind of a lie. There was that photo that he took with, okay, we're not going to talk about that here. The fact that he hasn't necessarily gone out there with any dramatic incidents like the Dustin Byfuglien thing or the gambling thing, various things that he has done over the past few years, he has been not as bad as he could have been. But now we're talking about him in a trade-like scenario because guess what? The Vancouver Canucks, they want to trade away their pending UFAs, and Evander Kane is just that. They're not going to re-sign this guy. There's no reason for them to do that. So let's dive into the scoop here. You had yourselves this post made by Donnie and Dolly on their Twitter account 2 days ago. Rick Dollywell's updates, the latest on the potential trade market for Evander Kane. And linked in the description will be this Canucks Daily article by Edward Jackson because it transcribes what it is that Dollywell says. There's interest in Evander Kane, said Rick Dollywell. I'm told there are teams like Colorado and Tampa Bay poking around. Donnie, can the Canucks get a second rounder for him or a third? The Avalanche would need the Canucks to retain. One thing about Kane, a lot of playoff games, a lot of playoff goals, a big body, he can wear teams down. Why do you think Colorado was interested? They see some value in this player. Can the Canucks get a second for him? The Kings lost Kevin Fiala. Are they into Kane more? And we had already spoken about Evander Kane and the idea of him going over to a Dallas or a Colorado, these two playoff contending teams that want some grit and some tertiary scoring on their wings. Evander Kane would probably bring a lot of that. I'll say this right here, if you give him limited minutes and you tell him straight up, hey, Evander, your role is to make lives difficult for the opposition, screw the goals, just be a wrecking ball, I would honestly think Evander Kane has that potential. It's just in Vancouver, he doesn't have that luxury. They can't tell him, hey, just be a wrecking ball, who cares about the goals? They're forcing him to score. They need him to score because nobody scores on the Vancouver Canucks. And he's been given a top spot in this lineup, and he's showing that he doesn't really have the wherewithal to be able to do much with that. But play him on a third line and give him some extra power play time, you could be looking at an Evander Kane that can be a half a point a game guy after missing out on an entire season like he did last year with the Edmonton Oilers. Not to mention the fact that just 2 seasons ago, he was a 44.20 goal guy with Edmonton. This is a decent player when you unlock those attributes out of him. And Vancouver, unfortunately, has been putting too much on a lot of their guys that they're just not able to string things together, you know? We just made a video about Jake DeBrusk. He's been fine in the past, but in Vancouver, especially this season, hasn't gone his way. Same could be said about Evander Kane. So if teams are really interested in this guy, they want a physical name, they want somebody that can step up. Doesn't look like Boone Jenner is available from Columbus anymore. Same could be said about Charlie Coyle. If teams want a physical player, Evander Kane could be that guy. Tampa Bay, their interest in him makes sense in my mind. You think about some of these players that they have housed and that have been showing off pretty well. There is a certain element of attitude that the Tampa Bay Lightning bring night to night. They've got Scott Sabourin in their lineup. They've got Curtis Douglas and Pontus Holmberg in their lineup. Brandon Hagel is a first-line player for the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is a team that could suit an Evander Kane-like personality very well. Even on the back end, you talk about Victor Hedman and his injury, the fact that he is no longer a top guy because of his health. That's still fine. You can still have his expertise and his guidance there on the back end. Meanwhile, you head over to the LA Kings, and all of a sudden, Kevin Fiala, he is out and he is no longer available. He is not an option for this hockey team. He is out for the year. You have some really interesting names in LA. And Evander Kane, of course, he was a San Jose Shark, so the Kings probably used to playing against Evander year after year. But this is a team that already has Corey Perry. They have Yoel Armia. They have some of these guys that are very difficult to play against and that just make opponents' lives difficult. Evander Kane would be a super interesting addition there. And Ken Holland, the guy in LA, he was the guy, was he not, that brought Evander to Edmonton in the first place? Something like that? Yeah, it's been a while, so obviously there is some buffer room for that. But it seems like the Evander Kane trade talk is heating up quite a bit. From Colorado and Dallas to LA and Tampa Bay, now that Dhaliwal is proposing the idea of Vancouver getting a second-round pick for this guy, I am all of a sudden a lot more intrigued and a lot more invested in what the future has in store for this player on the NHL trade market. The Vancouver Canucks essentially sent over Vasily Podkolzin for Evander Kane. They flipped him for a 4th to Edmonton, and then they sent that 4th-round pick back for Kane. So they helped the Oilers out by freeing up that cap space. Can they get an upgrade on that draft pick, though? If the Canucks are able to trade Evander for a second, they would have essentially turned a 4th-round pick into a second, which is pretty good, I would say. A lot of teams would like to get a free 2nd-round pick from just shelling away a 4th. So with all that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, whether or not Evander Kane actually has some sort of a bidding war opportunity going on for him, and whether or not teams like Colorado, Tampa, Dallas, or LA could be the final destination. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.